Most people believe emotions are weakness, but what if feeling nothing is the true path to mastering everything? Today, we confront the uncomfortable truth about how attachment quietly dictates your choices even when you think you're free. By the end of this video, you'll see why the ability to detach from what controls others will ultimately give you the clarity and power most will never access. Humans are conditioned to chase approval, react to insult, and cling to desire. Most of the time, you don't even notice it. Your mind runs on habits that quietly shape every decision. Awareness is the first step. Watch your impulses. Notice how anger, frustration, or craving nudges your choices, often without permission. This isn't weakness, it's information. Emotional regulation begins when you learn to pause before reacting, when you decide that feeling every stir of impulse does not have to dictate action. Mental clarity grows in this pause, in the deliberate observation of your inner landscape. Discipline isn't about forcing yourself through pain, it's about setting personal standards and meeting them consistently, even when no one is watching. Each small act of restraint compounds, building confidence that isn't loud but undeniable. Responsibility for your actions becomes effortless when you no longer blame circumstance or emotion. Boundaries, self-respect, and consistency naturally create social confidence because others sense the control you have over yourself. Long-term focus emerges when desire and distraction lose their grip, leaving space for intentional action. The more you master your inner world, the less chaotic life feels and the more presence, calm, and authority you carry simply by being consistent with yourself. Every impulse you feel is a signal of an unseen chain. Most men move through life reacting without realizing how often emotion hijacks thought. Anger flares, frustration tightens, desire tugs. You think these moments are spontaneous, but they are patterns. Recognizing them is the first act of mastery. Watch yourself closely. Notice the triggers that push you toward rash decisions or regret. Pause before you act. That pause is where clarity begins. Emotional regulation is not suppression, it is conscious choice. It is the discipline to acknowledge what arises within you without surrendering to it. Each time you resist the pull of impulse, you strengthen your internal authority. Self-discipline grows in these small, deliberate moments. It builds a foundation for every other decision you make, every interaction you hold, every standard you maintain. Personal standards are the compass of your life. They guide action when desire and distraction cloud judgment. Long-term focus emerges naturally when you no longer trade attention for immediate gratification. Responsibility for your actions becomes effortless when you stop blaming emotion for every misstep and instead see your role in every outcome. Social confidence, too, is a reflection of this inner work. When you act consistently with your values, maintain boundaries, and meet your own standards, others respond not to power but to the calm certainty you project. Mental clarity deepens as the noise of reactive living fades. You start to see patterns in your own behavior and in the world around you with quiet precision. The mind that observes itself, that measures impulses and responds deliberately, becomes a mind capable of navigating complexity without chaos. Each day, each choice, each act of restraint compounds. Life does not become easier, but it becomes more manageable, more predictable, more under your control, not through force over others, but through mastery over yourself. In this space, emotional stability, focused action, and measured presence are no longer aspirations. They become the standard by which you live. You begin to operate with a calm authority that is earned, internal, and unshakable, simply because you have learned to notice, pause, and act with intention. True mental discipline emerges when you watch your reactions as data, not directives. Most men confuse feeling with action, letting impulses dictate behavior and surrendering small fragments of their clarity without realizing it. Detachment is not numbness, it is conscious observation. It is the ability to sit with an emotional surge, frustration, desire, irritation, without being compelled to act on it immediately. You begin by noticing your impulses as signals, not commands, understanding that every reaction contains information about your internal state, your priorities, and your patterns. In these moments of observation, you reclaim control. Emotional regulation becomes practice, not theory. Every pause, every conscious choice strengthens the architecture of your self-discipline. You start holding yourself accountable, recognizing that every lapse is not an external failure, but a point of internal learning. Mental clarity grows when you stop feeding distraction and respond only from intentionality. Personal standards become your anchor. You begin to measure your behavior against them rather than against the expectations or provocations of others. Boundaries are no longer external shields but reflections of self-respect, guiding interactions with subtle authority rather than force. Social confidence emerges quietly, built on the consistency of your choices, the predictability of your behavior, and the competence you cultivate in handling yourself under pressure. Long-term focus is strengthened because you are no longer reactive. You are deliberate, capable of assessing the landscape of life with a calm, discerning eye. Responsibility for your actions becomes immediate and natural. You no longer outsource accountability to circumstance, emotion, or opinion. The more you observe without reacting, the more mental space you create to weigh options, prioritize intentions, and execute with precision. Each disciplined response compounds, forming habits that are imperceptibly powerful. You begin to operate in a state of heightened presence, where clarity and composure shape not just decisions but perception itself. Life does not demand less from you, but you respond with greater efficiency, patience, and measured energy. The mind that practices observation over reaction transforms every challenge into an opportunity for insight, every emotional surge into actionable understanding. Over time, this leads to a quiet authority that commands no attention yet influences everything, earned solely through mastery of your own thoughts, emotions, and actions. When you operate in this space, you are neither controlled by circumstance nor enslaved by impulse. You are the one who sets the pace, maintains the standard, and navigates life with calm, deliberate force, building self-respect, internal clarity, and enduring personal authority that no external factor can diminish. In high-stakes moments, the mind that feels everything is often the first to falter. Pressure amplifies every impulse, every fleeting emotion, and without awareness, even small disturbances can derail judgment. Emotional regulation under these conditions is not about suppression, it is about cultivating calm within, creating a mental space where clarity outpaces chaos. When you learn to observe your internal state without immediate reaction, you start to separate stimulus from response, impulse from choice. Each breath, each moment of deliberate attention, strengthens the architecture of your self-discipline. You begin to notice patterns. The triggers that once provoked instant reaction now appear as neutral data points, opportunities for measured action. Mental clarity sharpens in this calm, allowing you to see options that others miss, to weigh consequences without emotional distortion, and to prioritize effectively even when time is short or stakes are high. Personal standards serve as a compass here. They guide your behavior not by external pressure, but by the internal metric of what you have committed to uphold. Boundaries become consistent, not reactive. They protect your focus, preserve your energy, and reinforce self-respect. Responsibility for your actions becomes second nature because each decision is grounded in conscious evaluation rather than reflex. Social confidence, often misunderstood, is not born from bold gestures or dominance. It emerges quietly from competence, reliability, and presence under pressure. When others sense composure and measured intent, they respond naturally, without you needing to assert authority. Long-term focus strengthens because the mind that manages pressure internally is no longer distracted by fleeting emotion or external noise. It can invest in strategy, in deliberate growth, in outcomes aligned with internal standards rather than momentary desires. Each instance of restraint compounds, reinforcing neural pathways that favor discipline, measured response, and clear judgment. Over time, life's challenges no longer feel like sudden storms. They become terrain to navigate with anticipation, insight, and calm authority. Emotional stability is not a byproduct, it is a tool, a skill honed through conscious observation, repeated practice, and relentless honesty with oneself. The more you regulate under pressure, the more habitual clarity becomes, shaping not only your decisions but the perception of you by others. Presence deepens, and with it, the ability to carry yourself with quiet confidence, ethical authority, and unshakable composure. You realize that true influence begins internally. Every choice made without reactive interference reinforces self-respect, sharpens focus, and strengthens your capacity to act consistently, even when the world around you is unpredictable. Mastery over your emotions does not make life simpler, but it makes it navigable. Chaos no longer dictates outcomes, your clarity and deliberate action do. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to reinforce internal standards, to act with patience, to respond with precision, and to cultivate a personal authority grounded in competence, integrity, and unwavering self-discipline. In this state, you are fully present, fully accountable, and fully capable, not because the world bends to you, but because you have trained yourself to remain unmoved by transient impulses, to operate from calm, and to lead your own life with clear, deliberate intent. Small choices under control compound into decisive advantage. Every moment you resist the pull of distraction, every impulse you pause before acting on, every decision aligned with your internal standards adds weight to the foundation of your discipline. Mental mastery is built quietly in repetition, not in dramatic gestures. Each controlled action, choosing focus over fatigue, patience over impulse, principle over convenience, accumulates like layers of steel, forming the scaffolding for every success you pursue, internal or external. Emotional regulation underpins this process. When you acknowledge every thought and feeling without surrendering to it, you convert chaos into clarity. Mental clarity becomes habitual. You start to see patterns in your behavior, in challenges, in opportunities. Self-discipline is no longer a struggle. It becomes a framework guiding your actions, a force that acts subtly yet relentlessly to keep you aligned with your long-term goals. Personal standards serve as the compass here. They define acceptable behavior, prioritize what deserves attention, and act as benchmarks for your daily decisions. Boundaries become automatic, protecting your focus, energy, and integrity. Responsibility for your actions is immediate and unambiguous. You no longer outsource accountability to circumstance, others, or fleeting emotion. Social confidence arises naturally, not from asserting dominance, but from the consistency and reliability you demonstrate. People sense composure, competence, and presence, and they respond instinctively. Long-term focus strengthens because you are no longer reactive. Each choice, each moment of self-restraint compounds into an advantage invisible to those who seek instant gratification. The more you practice this internal mastery, the more effortless it becomes to operate under pressure, to navigate complexity, and to act from a place of calm authority. Small lapses do not define you, they are data, opportunities to reinforce discipline and adjust strategy. Over time, your internal state becomes a reservoir of strength, steady, reliable, and self-sustaining. Challenges that once felt overwhelming now appear manageable because your mind is trained to prioritize principle over impulse, clarity over chaos, and long-term alignment over short-term satisfaction. Presence deepens. Each interaction, each decision, each action becomes intentional, grounded in awareness and consistent standards. Your internal scaffolding supports not only personal achievement but also the ability to move through life with quiet assurance, ethical authority, and self-respect. Mastery is measured not in recognition, applause, or external validation, but in the daily demonstration of control, consistency, and clarity. The more you reinforce this internal structure, the more resilient you become to distraction, pressure, and emotional turbulence. Habits of focus, restraint, and deliberate action accumulate like compounding interest, invisible yet transformative. Your competence, your calm, and your composure grow together, reinforcing one another in a feedback loop of internal strength. Every choice made with intention becomes a building block for the next, forming a life guided by principle, integrity, and self-discipline. In this state, you carry an authority that requires no assertion, a confidence rooted in competence and internal alignment, and a presence that others respect without effort. The quiet mastery of your internal world allows clarity to prevail over confusion, consistency to outpace chaos, and disciplined action to shape outcomes over time. Each controlled decision, each measured response, and each act of accountability compounds into a life where mental clarity, emotional stability, and personal authority are not aspirations but habitual realities. You are not defined by external circumstances, by the reactions of others, or by fleeting impulses. You are defined by the choices you make consistently, the standards you uphold, and the discipline, intentional life you construct from within. This is the essence of compounding mental discipline, small acts of self-mastery, multiplied over time, creating a foundation strong enough to navigate complexity, sustain long-term focus, and carry yourself with calm, unwavering authority in every domain of life. When choices are unclouded by fear, desire, or ego, your strategy is no longer reactive. Most men live under the illusion that their decisions are autonomous, yet so many are secretly dictated by attachment to approval, to comfort, to outcomes that satisfy short-term impulses. Freedom comes not from external circumstances but from internal clarity. When you learn to recognize the subtle ways fear nudges you, desire blinds you, and ego distorts perception, you begin to act deliberately. Each decision becomes an opportunity to exercise self-discipline, to test the strength of your personal standards, and to reinforce your long-term focus. Emotional regulation is essential here. You cannot make clear decisions while caught in the turbulence of unresolved impulse or unchecked feeling. By observing without reacting, you create mental space to evaluate options based on principle and rational insight rather than fleeting emotion. This mental space transforms pressure into opportunity and complexity into manageable patterns. Personal responsibility is sharpened because every choice is owned fully, without deflection. When you accept the consequences of your decisions without excuse, you build an unshakable foundation of integrity. Social confidence, often misinterpreted as charm or aggression, is born naturally from this internal mastery. When your actions are consistent, your presence calm, and your responses measured, others respond instinctively, not to dominance, but to the clarity, competence, and composure you project. Boundaries become an extension of self, respect, clearly communicated without needing justification, and respected without enforcement. Mental clarity deepens because unclouded decisions reduce cognitive noise, allowing you to anticipate outcomes, weigh options, and act with precision. Each intentional choice compounds, reinforcing neural pathways that favor self-discipline, patience, and long-term alignment. Life does not become easier, but your navigation of it becomes exponentially more effective. You learn to distinguish between what deserves energy and what is distraction, between impulses that demand attention and signals that provide information. The more detached you are from immediate gratification or reactive patterns, the more your mind operates with strategic intent, capable of sustaining focus on what truly matters. Small decisions become profound leverage. Consistency becomes authority. Calm becomes presence. The world begins to respond differently, not because you exert influence over it, but because you operate from a place of unshakable internal alignment. Every interaction, every negotiation, every moment of choice becomes a reflection of the self-discipline and clarity you have cultivated. Emotional stability allows you to act even under pressure. Clarity ensures your actions are purposeful, and discipline guarantees that these actions reinforce rather than compromise your standards. Over time, this approach transforms not only outcomes but perception. You are recognized for reliability, composure, and competence. Presence becomes a silent signal of authority, earned through consistent action, ethical alignment, and mastery over your own internal state. Long-term focus is no longer theoretical. It is the natural result of decision, making grounded in detachment, clarity, and principle. Each choice made without attachment compounds, shaping habits, behaviors, and mental frameworks that favor deliberate action over impulsive reaction. Self-respect grows because every decision aligns with internal standards rather than external pressures. Boundaries strengthen, and social interactions are no longer arenas of conflict but reflections of integrity and measured conduct. As clarity and calm compound, the mind becomes capable of navigating complexity with poise. You begin to see patterns that once eluded you, anticipate challenges without anxiety, and respond to circumstances with deliberate, controlled action. Emotional regulation, mental clarity, and disciplined decision-making converge to create a state of internal sovereignty where external chaos no longer dictates behavior. Each moment of conscious choice reinforces authority over yourself, sharpens focus, and enhances the quiet power of presence. Over time, your life is no longer a series of reactive episodes, but a carefully navigated path defined by principle, discipline, and intentional action. In this space, confidence is automatic, competence is visible, and authority is recognized, not asserted, because it flows naturally from the mastery of your internal world. The mind that acts without attachment, that observes before responding, and that consistently honors its own standards becomes a force of deliberate, steady influence. Pressure, temptation, and distraction are no longer threats. They are opportunities to reaffirm clarity, reinforce discipline, and exercise intentionality. Every choice compounds, every act of restraint strengthens, and every moment of conscious observation builds the infrastructure of a life governed by principle, self-respect, and internal authority. The quiet mastery of your decisions transforms not only how you move through the world, but how the world responds to you. And in that alignment, confidence, focus, and personal power emerge naturally, ethically, and unshakably from within. Detachment is not emptiness, it is sovereignty. Most men mistake emotional reactivity for engagement, mistaking every impulse for a call to action, every feeling for truth. Yet surrendering to these patterns comes at an invisible cost: scattered focus, compromised decisions, and energy spent chasing distractions rather than reinforcing personal standards. When you observe without attachment, you reclaim the territory of your own mind. Emotional regulation becomes the foundation, not the edge, of your strength. You begin to recognize that anger, desire, or anxiety are signals, not directives, and in that recognition, the first layer of control emerges. Mental clarity expands as the clutter of reactive thought fades, revealing patterns and opportunities previously invisible under emotional turbulence. Self-discipline shifts from a forced practice into a natural rhythm, reinforced by repeated conscious decisions, small acts of restraint, and unwavering adherence to your internal compass. Each controlled response compounds over time, building habits that transform pressure into measured action, confusion into strategic insight, and chaos into composure. Personal standards are no longer abstract ideals, they are lived realities, evident in how you respond, what you prioritize, and how you maintain boundaries without compromise. Responsibility for your actions becomes immediate and tangible, every choice acknowledged, every consequence owned, every error absorbed as data for improvement rather than excuse or blame. Social confidence, often misunderstood, is now a natural outcome. It arises not from posturing, manipulation, or external approval, but from consistency, presence, and competence. People instinctively respect calm authority, reliability, and measured behavior, responding to the quiet mastery you display, not to overt assertion or dominance. Long-term focus deepens because the mind unclouded by attachment can prioritize what truly matters, investing energy in deliberate growth rather than reactive satisfaction. Life's challenges no longer destabilize you. They are reframed as structured exercises in internal mastery, opportunities to test clarity, patience, and decision-making under pressure. Each instance of detachment reinforces neural pathways for self-control, strategic thinking, and sustained presence. Habits of focus and restraint compound silently, creating a reservoir of mental strength that shapes every future choice, interaction, and endeavor. Pressure, temptation, and uncertainty cease to dictate behavior. Instead, they serve as mirrors, revealing where clarity, patience, and discipline require reinforcement. Every choice becomes intentional, deliberate, and aligned with your personal code, producing cumulative effects that transform not just outcomes, but perception, your own and that of others. The world begins to respond differently, not because you control it, but because your internal alignment radiates as competence, calm, and ethical authority. Emotional stability is no longer reactive, it is cultivated, maintained, and leveraged as a tool to navigate complexity with precision. Mental clarity allows you to see beyond distractions, anticipate patterns, and act with foresight rather than reflex. Self-discipline structures your days, decisions, and actions around principle, creating an invisible infrastructure that supports long-term achievement and personal growth. Personal standards guide every interaction, every decision, and every boundary, ensuring that energy is spent purposefully, not wasted in reaction. Responsibility becomes a natural extension of this alignment. Every act is accounted for, every result absorbed as insight, and every misstep reframed as a chance to reinforce mastery. Social confidence emerges from this consistency, quiet yet unmistakable, an authority recognized without being claimed, respect earned without performance, influence achieved without force. Long-term focus is reinforced daily as detachment allows you to prioritize principle over impulse, strategy over emotion, and clarity over chaos. Each choice, each moment of restraint, each act of disciplined observation compounds into an enduring framework of internal mastery, shaping habits, perception, and capability. Challenges transform into opportunities as emotional patterns lose their control over you, leaving space for deliberate action, calculated patience, and measured response. Presence becomes effortless, composure habitual, and authority intrinsic rather than performed. The mind that masters detachment can operate under pressure without compromise, navigate complexity with foresight, and act from principle rather than reaction. Over time, this mastery generates a life defined not by external circumstances, fleeting impulses, or validation, but by consistent adherence to personal standards, unwavering discipline, and deliberate, ethical action. Clarity, calm, and internal sovereignty become the default state, allowing you to navigate every situation with control, confidence, and integrity. Emotional impulses, once chaotic and consuming, are transformed into data points for observation, reflection, and deliberate choice. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to reinforce self-discipline, strengthen mental clarity, and practice responsibility. Boundaries, consistently upheld, protect energy and focus while communicating self-respect silently yet powerfully. The compounding effect of repeated, detached, intentional decisions builds a life in which internal mastery, not circumstance, dictates performance, perception, and presence. In this space, every action aligns with principle, every response is deliberate, and every decision reinforces long-term growth. Presence radiates quietly yet unmistakably. Confidence arises naturally from competence and internal consistency. You are no longer moved by fleeting emotion, external provocation, or attachment to outcomes. Instead, you act from sovereignty over your own mind, leveraging detachment as the ultimate tool of self-mastery. Life becomes navigable with precision, focus, and ethical authority. Emotional stability, clarity, discipline, and responsibility converge into a sustained state of internal power that requires no assertion, demands no validation, and commands respect simply through the consistent practice of mastery over oneself. In this state, every challenge is an opportunity, every interaction a reflection of internal standards, and every decision a deliberate step toward enduring competence, presence, and personal authority. Master your mind, and the external world aligns quietly in your favor. If you're committed to refining this clarity and building enduring authority over your choices, subscribe and explore the depths of psychological mastery with us.